along to County Matters Sligo. Coming up on today's show, we're going to meet Damien Brennan, the president of the International Yates Society. We're also going to go into Sligo town to the Yates building and meet Niamh Devaney and hear about the Young Yates Society and what they like to do in their spare time. But first, we're going to meet Annie West, the famous illustrator, whose vivid and colourful prints adorn the walls of the likes of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise's home. She has a very interesting take on Yeats, and most particularly his love life. Hi Annie, and thank you very much for having us here today.
Thank you for coming.
So tell me, how did you get into the world of illustrating?
I was at school, secondary school, and I had a choice between home economics and art, and I was really bad at cooking, so I decided if I don't do home economics, I'll have to do art. So that's how that started. I was useless at drawing, had no idea about any kind of drawing or none of my family were artists, so I started doing that. And then when I got to a stage where I was leaving school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So they suggested I go to art school because that's where you go when you don't have any other plans at all. So I went to art school in Dunleary, which was a fantastic experience, and I learned a whole lot there. But it kind of evolved into a different kind of thing, and it went from just basic drawing into something else, and then fine art, and then that didn't work out, and then something else, and I ended up working in RTE because I had got myself somehow into the television design area in art school, and I was the only one doing it. So when the job came up for the graduate to go to RTE, there was only me. So I got into RTE that way, which is, by today's standards, was easy enough. But I went into the design department in RTE then, and I learned how to do design for television. And then somebody came along and said they wanted something done on the Irish RM, which is this TV series that was being done years and years ago. I wasn't doing anything, went off on that, and they said to me in RTE, you'll be back in a few weeks when you have that done. Never went back. Went freelance, started doing movies, went on from there. And then in 1991, I just decided I'd had enough of all that, and decided to disappear off down to Sligo. I still don't know why, but came down to Sligo with no plan at all, and just found myself in a situation where I thought I might give it a lash doing some illustrating. And it's a series of happy accidents, really, because as I made that decision, I got asked to illustrate a children's book, which I had never done before in my life, and it was a terrifying experience because I had no idea what I was doing, but I pretended I knew what I was doing, which I do frequently. But did that for a publisher and decided I might give this a try, and went on. And living down in Sligo was probably a lot of people would have thought that was a bad decision at the time, but they just invented the internet, so it was quite handy. So it all evolved from there, and I've been doing that ever since. I'm 23 years now in Sligo.
So now mainly your work consists of some private commissions.
Yes.
And also illustrating books still.
Yes. I do a certain amount of children's book illustration. Not as much as I used to, because children's publishing seems to be, taking a bit of a side road at the moment. But most of my work at the moment is private commissions for people. Say, for instance, people retiring, 50th birthdays, a special present for people who have everything they need, but they don't have this. It's not a caricature. I don't do caricatures at all. It's more of an illustration of everything about you in the one picture, as much as you can possibly get into it, and they've proved very popular. I also do a series of my own illustrations, which happened because I was trying to get a book published about W.B. Yeats, which we'll get to in a minute, but nobody wanted to publish it at the time. So I decided, well, why am I waiting for newspapers to commission me? Why am I waiting for publishers to commission me? I'll just go and do them anyway and have exhibitions and have illustrations as art, which nobody else was doing either at the time. They are now, but at the time they weren't. So I started having exhibitions, and everything has come back the way after that. So now the illustrations are going to be published in a book, and that's the way it's worked out, which is kind of a funny way of doing things, but it's worked out very well.
And one of your commissions is this here, and this is the your take on the Lake Isle of Innisfree. So tell me, how did this all come about?
What happened there was the County Council are working on a series of new walks around Sligo for tourists and natives alike. And one of the things that they have to do is to show people, it's very difficult at times to know what's there because it's hard to see. And signposts are all very well and good, but what they're doing is they're putting up boards to show how all the different walks are connected. So what they asked me to do is to go down to the Lake Isle of Innisfree, which is very tiny and insignificant really, but to show all the way that you can walk the whole length of Lough Gill on your feet or on a bike, and how all the different walks are going to be connected. So I had to draw that as if I was a pigeon or a passing bird. It's a tricky thing to try and show, but between the lot of us, we managed to do it, and those will be put up down at the various spots and car parks down in.
And Annie, you use a pencil first.
Yes, I'm not a very disciplined person. What I do is I go off and I have a think about it, and there's a certain amount of thinking time. Okay, right. You need to work it out in your head what you're doing, and then I would do a very rough scribble with my pencil, which is usually in the back of my ear or somewhere like that. I don't have enough discipline to have a sketchbook, and anyway, sketchbooks aren't always the right size, so I just grab a piece of paper, do the roughest, very rough sketch, and then I'll have a look at that, and then I will process that in my mind, and then go and do it again, and about 3 or 4 times over again in pencil, just until I'm happy with how it looks, and that gets presented to the client then when it's at a legible stage, shall we say, and then make a few changes and make a few changes. It's kind of an ongoing thing between the client and myself, where we just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking in pencil, and then when everybody's happy, then I sit down and I go at it with pen and ink.
So that's all pen and ink there?
Yeah, I get inks from America. There's a certain type of ink that I'm very fond of, Dr. Martin's inks, that you can't get here. Well, sometimes you can, but I get them directly from the supplier in America. And they're light fast inks that are, the colours are just gorgeous. There are inks you can get in this country, but they're very watery, I find.
Well, they're very vibrant, the colours there, particularly the green of the grass.
Yes.
And the different shades.
Yeah.
It's stunning. But you've got a very exciting project coming up in November.
Yes, I have.
And a mischievous, I must say, take on Yates.
Yes.
With your new book, which is Yates in Love.
Yes.
So we were very taken with the front page. So can you explain to me who these people are?
Okay. That's a final rough dummy of the book. It's nearly finished now, but what that is an illustration of the first time that Yeats met Maud Gonne, the love of his life, and his muse, and the source of all his love poetry and everything.
And he was completely mad about her.
He was absolutely obsessed with her.
I mean, the next one that we see in here is the one about tread softly on my dreams, which you've taken a very interesting take on, Annie. So
yeah, well, this was the other thing as well, is that a lot of his poetry is turned into a bit of a cliche,
right?
And people use the poetry for their weddings and all this stuff. And I was thinking, well, there has to be a funny side to this. I mean, this is my job, is to look for the funny side of everything, or the mad side of everything. So I was looking at that poem and I was thinking, I absolutely hated learning that in school because they just make you learn it. And so I thought, well, what if he actually had the heavens embroidered cloths? It's all kind of what ifs.
Yes, yeah.
With everything. So I thought, well, take it literally and just have him spreading the cloths at her feet, and she walks in, trips over them, falls on her face.
Which we can see here.
Which is
his mud gone. I actually feel a bit sorry for Yates now with his unrequited love.
It's funny you should say that, because I felt the same way. By the time I'd finished the whole series, I thought, I actually feel sorry for this guy, because she is so mean to him the whole time. And every time he went off, he did have another couple of dalliances with other women, but every time he did, she'd come along and click her fingers and he'd be gone. Mess it all up. And then she went off and married. She'd had 2 children with another guy in France while all this was going on. Never told him.
And he had no idea.
No idea. And then she went off and married John McBride, and that was that. But
he always kept it
he
raw
always
for her.
kept this thing going for her. But the person I feel most sorry for is his wife, George Yates, because she's the most neglected person in literary history, and she's down there buried with him. Nobody cares about her, you know. So.
Yes, well, you'll have to bring out a book about his wife and her unrequited love. Then that would be a series of Yates's women. But this book is available in November.
That book is going to be out in November. It's my way of commemorating Yates' 150th birthday,
which would be next year. Yes.
So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in Sligo for that.
Well, they look absolutely fabulous to me.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for having us here today.
Thank you, Claire.
Well, that was Annie West, a lady a little like her prince, vivid and colourful. But stay with us, because coming up after the break, we speak to Damien Brennan, the president of the International Yates Society. So welcome back to part 2 of the programme. Soon we're going to be going into Sligo town to the Yates building to meet Niamh Devaney of the Young Yates Society. But first, Damien Brennan is going to give us a tour of the Drumcliff graveyard, which is full of history, has a very important resident, and is nestled in the base of the Ben Bulben mountain. So, hi Damien, tell me, how did Yates start his relationship with Sligo? Where did it all come from?
Well, the first part of it starts right here at Drumcliff, where the ancient high cross behind us was re-erected by his great-grandfather when he was rector here between 1811 and 1846. Didn't die here, he died back in Dublin. And then his son became a rector in County Down, and his grandson was John Butler Yates, William Butler Yates' father. John Butler Yates came here in about 1862 to stay with the Pollexfen family, who were the richest family in Sligo town and whom he had been at boarding school with on the Isle of Man. And while here he met Susan Pollexfen, fell in love and married her. John Butler Yates, at the time of their marriage, was an attorney or a barrister, studying to be a barrister in Trinity College in Dublin, and he gave up that to become a portrait painter. And to pursue his art, he took the family to live essentially for the first 20 years of their lives in London. He was a very good portrait painter, but he had one fatal flaw. He never finished his pictures on time. So when the wealthy man commissioned the painting of his beautiful wife, he never delivered it in time, and so he didn't get paid for it. So the children lived in a certain poverty. Not real full poverty, but in a certain poverty, and mother went into a funk from which she never really recovered. The great escape for the children, and this is where the Yates thing really comes alive, the great escape for the children was when they got as far as Liverpool. Grandfather's ships, he owned a big shipping company here in Sligo, and grandfather's ships ran into Liverpool 3 times a week. So if they could get as far as Liverpool, they were home and dry, as it were. They were back on grandfather's ships where they were treated with great respect. They were back here in what Yeats called the land of heart's desire, and they were back to certainty. Food was certain, social standing was certain, prayer was certain, because grandfather was a great Bible reader. And so things were, there was a certainty about Sligo that they never had in London.
They obviously had a security. So they just had to get their way to Liverpool. And then they travelled on their own grandfather's ships. And would they have been cargo ships?
No, they were passenger and cattle ships. They were the 2 big exports out of Sligo after the famine. Before the famine it was butter, after the famine it was cattle and passengers. People going out of poverty to work in England as navvies and as housemaids. That was really the big business.
And what's the relationship? What does this Drumcliff churchyard have to do with the whole story?
Well, Drumcliff itself was founded by St. Columkill or St. Columba, they're one and the same people, in 574. And so there's been a continuous Christian praying community on this site since 574. After the Reformation, the old medieval church that was here became Church of Ireland, or Episcopal, or Anglican, depending on where you're watching from this programme. And the current church was built in 1803. And Yates's great-grandfather came here as a rector, having grown up in Dublin, came here as the rector, as the priest in charge of the Anglican Church of Ireland Episcopal community in 1811.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the Celtic cross behind us here.
Well, the Celtic cross is firstly, they're to be found in various monastery sites across Ireland. They're unique to Ireland. That tall cross with the ringed circle is very particular to the Celtic Christian motif in Irish monasteries. They're designed to illustrate the Bible, some of the stories of the Bible for the illiterate poor people. So Claire, here we are at the grave. The Nobel laureate poet won the Nobel Prize in 1923, first Irishman to ever do so. 3 others did it after him, but he died in 1939, as you can see, at the age of 74 in the south of France. And then after the war, in keeping with his instructions, which he gave in the last poem, and which he gave to his wife Georgie on his deathbed, he said, "Leave me here in peace in south of France," where he died, and then when the war is over, take me back quietly to Sligo and put me to rest.
Damien, there are rumours that actually Yeats is not buried in this grave at all, that it was the man in the grave next to him. What's the actual truth of that?
Well, nobody knows the actual truth of that, Claire. But what is absolutely actually true is that in 1938, September 1938, the 4th of September 1938, Yeats wrote that he wanted to be buried here.
Right.
And he chose, after a lifetime of investigation on the paranormal and the occult and theosophy and all sorts of things that he had experimented with all his life, in a very interesting way, he completed his last poem with a full stop, and he completed his life story, his whole story, by coming back to this churchyard where his great-great-grandfather had been rector. In 1938, he wrote what he calls the last poem, or what we think of as the last poem. He was still writing until he died. And I'm just going to give you the last 2 stanzas of it. Irish poets, learn your trade, sing whatever is well made. Scorn the sort now growing up, all out of shape from toe to top. Their unremembering hearts and heads, base-born products of base beds. Sing the peasantry and then, hard-riding country gentlemen, the holiness of monks and after, porter drinkers, randy laughter. Sing the lords and ladies gay that were beaten into the clay through 7 heroic centuries. Cast your mind on other days, that we in coming days may be still the indomitable Irishry. Under bare Ben Bulben's head, in Drumcliff churchyard Yates is laid. An ancestor was rector there, long years ago, a church stands near. By the road an ancient cross, no marble, no conventional phrase. On limestone quarried near the spot, by his command these words are cut. Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horseman pass by.
Well, that was Damien Brennan at Yates's grave in Drumcliff, County Sligo. Keeping with our Yates theme this week, we're now going into the Yates building in Sligo town to meet Niamh Devaney from the Young Yates Society. So tell me, Niamh, how did you acquire this building?
Well, the building was built back in 1897 by Vincent Craig, and it was then a bank for many years, but it was later donated to the Yates Society by the Allied Irish banks. We've been running out, the Yates Society has been running out of here ever since. It began with the International Summer School, which was just growing in popularity year by year by year, and they needed a more stable place to run everything out of and keep the society going. So the society has been here ever since, and the summer school is now the longest running summer school in Ireland.
And so the summer school takes place here.
Yeah.
And what date is that on this summer?
This summer it's the 27th of July to the 8th of August. And a lot of activities take place here, including the seminars, and the lectures then are in the Hawkswell Theatre across town.
And what else do you do in the building here now? What else do you use it for?
Well, the Society has lots of different branches doing lots of different things. One of the main things would be the High Bridge Gallery, which we just recently relaunched, and that's upstairs. And we have different exhibitions in there on a fortnightly basis. And we also have lots of poetry events. We have the Poets Parlour, who meet monthly, and the Poets Circle meet on Wednesday mornings. And there's also Young Yates, who do a lot of activities in here as well. And then there's the space is available to rent, so different groups come in and out and interact with the space a lot, which is nice, just to interact with the community in different groups.
And one of the rooms that I was very impressed with was sort of like a library.
Yeah, that's a fantastic room. That's my favourite room in the building, actually, and we have a lot of meetings in there. Usually we have a weekly Young Yates meeting, and they often come in and say, where are we having the meeting? I always say the library, because it's the nicest room, and it's got a great view of the Garvogue, and the council also have their meetings in there, and it's also another space available to rent. For example, the Spanish Society come in on a weekly basis and use that space.
Niamh, you are obviously a great supporter of Yeats. You're the head of the Young Yates Society. So where did you get the love of Yeats?
Well, I suppose my initial interaction with Yeats is the typical Irish teenager through school, and it was later on I actually, something sparked with Yeats and myself. I went to college and I studied history, and to be honest, I admire Yeats more as a historical figure, really, part of our tradition, our heritage and culture, and his involvement in society and his politics, and just as a voice, really, more so than his poetry. His poetry is fantastic and I love it and I'm very drawn to it, but the reason he caught my eye was his personality and his activities, and just how he interacted with society and his commentary as well. So that would be really my background, being history and drama as well. You know, lots of people talk about Yeats's poetry, but he was a playwright also. So I'd be very interested in his drama works, which again is part of the summer school. And that really sort of relit my love of Yeats last year during the summer school. I had a scholarship and I took part in the drama seminar, which involved performing in one of Yeats's plays in the Hawkswell Theatre. So that was just a fantastic opportunity and great to engage with his work, his theatre work, you know. So that would be me and Yeats, really.
And why did you start the Young Yates Society?
Well, I have to be honest here, it wasn't me personally who started it, but I've been here from the early days. Keith Higgins actually is a young volunteer here. He'd volunteered here for a long time before Young Yates started, and he just, along with the manager, decided to get this initiative of Young Yates going, just to get a bit more activity and youth and energy into the building, and more ideas and possibilities. And I work with another group in town, Branching Out, which is a youth arts group. So he came down to me to talk to me about how that operation developed. And I came up to a meeting, and I've been here every week since, and I'm here on a daily basis now. So we just decided that it would be nice to get more activity going on in here, and about accessibility to the arts as well. We'd have free events. So since we began, we launched on Yates Day last year, which is June 13th, Yates's birthday. So this year it'll be our first birthday and Yates's birthday, so we jumped on that bandwagon. But last year we launched with a big party, and ever since we have monthly workshops, visual art workshops for primary school kids, and art workshops for secondary school students. We also have monthly music workshops, which are free. We ask for donations, and people are always very generous because they appreciate the fact that they're free events, you know, and we get different local artists in to share their talents and skills with the participants. And we also have monthly open mics, because, you know, we think it's important to be doing workshops, but also to provide a performance platform that young people are getting the opportunity to share their work and their skills. So our open mics are the first Saturday of every month, and people come in of all ages. We've had a 5-year-old singing, and he was just fantastic. And we've had all sorts of musicians and people right on up into their 60s and 70s coming in and singing or sharing some of their poetry or reciting some Yeats. So it's great to have that, you know, intergenerational feel, and that's what Young Yates is about as well, because we have to respect what went before and what's the foundations and the history.
Well, Niamh, that's fantastic. I would imagine that Yates would be very proud of you and delighted to see a new young generation of Sligonians appreciating his work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's show, with many thanks to Niamh, Damien and Annie. Don't forget to tune in next week for another edition of County Matters from Sligo.